back, relax, and maybe get yourself a snack. Me and you gonna have a little chat about books. Hey guys! So I am here today to do a very exciting video. This video is going to be my top 10 books that I read in 2019. So, interestingly, when I wrote my list, I realised that out of the 10, 8 of them are self-published. And I think this comes from two different factors. Number one, I've been reading so much more self-published in 2019 because of the SBFBO, and also because a lot of authors have been sending me their books. And also, I think I really didn't read a lot of books that were either continuing series or new books from authors I already loved that I would expect to be 5 stars in 2019. So, for that reason, this one might be a little bit interesting to you guys. These are not really in an order per se, but the top 2 are definitely the top 2 by like a clear mile. They're also both self-published books, and I think they're fantastic, so you guys should definitely read them. So, the first book I want to mention is Kings of Paradise, which is by Richard Nell. And in this story, we are following 2 main characters. We have one who is called Rucker, who is a young boy with a disfigurement that we follow right from when he is very, very young, and he's living with his mother in quite a tumultuous lifestyle. But as the story goes on, he learns a lot and he develops a lot, and he follows the teachings of the book which his mother has given him. We also follow Kale, who is kind of a prince, and he's someone who has quite a glamorous lifestyle. However, when the story begins, his glamorous lifestyle is kind of coming to an end because he has been sent away by his father to go and train with the army and kind of get some discipline and learn alongside the men and women that he finds there. And he develops quite strong ties with many of the people who he ends up working with. And finally, we have another character who I would consider kind of a main character. She is called Dala, and she's one who I find a little bit harder to kind of quantify at first, but I liked her more as the story went on. She is a young girl who has to leave her family because essentially they are too poor to look after her and feed her, but she goes away and she becomes a priestess in training, and her story kind of develops from that point onwards. Now, I audiobooked this. I thought the audio was very good, and I definitely enjoyed the whole story, but it's quite a slow starter. I feel like it took me a little while to get into this story, so bear that in mind if it is going to be one that you pick up. However, once it did get going, I really enjoyed it. It's very classic fantasy, it's epic, it's big in scope, the world is large, there's a lot going on, and the characters do end up overlapping. There's, I think, 2 books out in the series at the moment, although I haven't read the second one just yet, but I do plan to. One of the interesting things about this book is that we don't only have sort of really good or really bad characters, we have a lot of very morally grey characters, and the magic in this world comes in quite a few different forms as well. We see some characters who can inspire people by their actions, but we also see more kind of quantifiable magic in the form of Rucker, who has this ability to learn things incredibly quickly, like way quicker than would normally be the case. I would say the magic of this world has some familiar traits, but it's also original and it feels like its own thing too, so I like that a lot. The next one I want to talk about is called Symphony of the Wind, and it's by Stephen McKinnon. This one was a story that I really enjoyed. It's a big adventure, again, set in a large kind of epic sprawling world, and this one focuses on a couple of different characters too. Some of the characters that I would kind of say stand out the most include Serna, who is a young girl who grows up in an orphanage. She's kind of been abandoned since she was very young, and she is now about the age, just about, where she can join the Raincatchers, which is a guild of people who go on adventures on ships and try and catch the rain for various things in this world. She's very feisty, she has a lot of really good moments of training and development over the course of the book, and she finds out a lot about herself and her real identity as the story goes on as well. We also have Tierra, who is in a relationship with the captain of this guild and this ship, and she is quite an interesting character. She doesn't really come into a main character later in the story, where she is forced to do something incredibly awful, something that she would never normally have done if she could have changed things, and the story of her adventure goes from there. She's kind of on the run from that point forwards. We also have Tyson Gallows, who is a man desperate to find out what happened to his fiancée. She went missing, and he doesn't know an awful lot about why or where she went to, but he's very much determined to find her and find out what happened to her if he can. And the world itself is a very interesting one here as well. Not only do we have a world where water needs to be shipped in by these rain catchers, but we also have a world where electricity is generated by giant massive spires and can cause all sorts of storms. People work for different guilds, and many of these guilds are corrupt at the time where we're following the story. There are brothels all over the place and people who pimp one another out. It's a very shady place to live, and it's not somewhere that you would really willingly want to go. But we follow a story of these main characters and their adventures, but also a deeper story of the political corruption that has been going on in this world and how things get to the point of corruption that they are. And we find out a lot more as the story kind of gets to an end about this world and how things have been really going quite wrong. The next one I want to talk to you about is called The Gentleman's Guide to Vice and Virtue. This book I audiobooked and I found it so much fun. This is a seriously hilarious kind of gay romance story, but it's set in a time where people would go on like a big adventure, a grand trip around the world, a grand tour, and this was supposedly to kind of get them to have their adventure there and then settle down into sort of daily life as a young aristocrat. And we follow two young men and also the sister of one of these young men as they go on their grand tour around. They just have a rip-roaring time. They're not conventionally noble. They're quite fun and playful. They have a lot of desire for one another. It's definitely a bit of a romp. So there is some steamy time. If that's not for you, maybe avoid it. But if it is, definitely this is fun. And I just think this is a hilarious adventure. So I really enjoyed this and I would definitely recommend it if you're looking for something a bit more lighthearted. I also really like the second book in the series as well. So I'd recommend both of them. The next one I want to recommend is Atlas Alone by Emma Newman. This is a Planetfall series novel. And I would say you probably shouldn't read this one unless you've read the previous Planetfall books. I know a lot of her Planetfall books can be read individually, and you probably could read this individually, but you will give yourself some spoilers for previous books in the series, and so therefore I don't want to tell you guys too much about it. Suffice to say, I really enjoyed this one and I thought it was excellent, and there is a twist which I kind of saw coming but not fully, so I would definitely recommend it. It also has interesting kind of AI, cool technology, it's set in space on a spaceship. It's great, so I definitely recommend this. And yeah, we're following some characters who are really kind of having a hard time quantifying what is going on with them and their lives and how they can deal with this new reality once Earth is not really where they're living anymore. So it's very interesting, a lot of great themes in the whole of the Planetfall series, but I really enjoyed this particular instalment, which I read in 2019. Another book I want to talk about is Sunrider. This is by Raphael Hoffman, and I really enjoyed this. It's the first one in a series, and I read it as part of the SBFBO. I have done a full review of this, so I'll link that, but basically it's a world where there is a young boy we're following who he's never really had a very good life until a new person comes and joins his mine called Goblin, and together Finn and Goblin kind of have to go on a big adventure across the world to find their own kind of people. They have to escape the bad guys as they go, and they find this magical suit along the way which kind of gives them powers which they would never have dreamed of. And it's all about their adventure to find out how to work the magic, what this world is truly like outside of the mine that they've both only really known, and what friendship is like to them and what that means. They kind of develop a really strong bond over the course of the story, and it's all about their relationship and their adventure together and their adventures in the world as a whole. So I really enjoyed this. Next up on my list is one that is traditionally published. This is the final one in the Lightbringer series by Brent Weeks, and this is called The Burning White. I actually reread the entire Brent Weeks series, and I think I did a video talking about it as well. I love this series. It's one of my all-time favourites. The magic system and the characters are just so complex and really interesting when you get your head around them. I think it does take a little while to get into book number 1, but by book number 5, the final one, you're just hooked and you can't wait to find out what happens. I think for a series ender, this one did a good job with tying up a lot of the questions that you get and you form over the course of the series. However, I also think there were some moments in this book which were slightly rushed, so it wasn't my favourite one in the entire series. I do think it's a really good series, a really solid one overall, and the characters have so many good moments and the plot twists are insane. So many times I was shocked or surprised by sort of what was going on here, but I highly recommend this series, and this is the final one. I really loved it, and I think you guys would love this series as well. If you like anything like Sanderson, this definitely has vibes like that as well. Next up on my favourites of the year, I have Sarafinas Lament by Sarah Chorn. This is again a book that I read for the SBFBO, and this was one of my really close to being a finalist books. It was so high up there that I couldn't choose for a while, and it was just one book coming along that blew this one out the water that meant this wasn't a finalist, because it was one of my all-time favourites of the year and of SBFBO in general that I've read. I would highly recommend it. It is kind of horror in style, so if you don't like sort of gore and dark stuff, you're probably not going to like this. It has cannibalism, it has dark things in the story, and I've done a full review of this, so I won't go into too much detail about it, but suffice to say, I really enjoyed it. The writing was so lyrical and beautiful, despite the horrible stuff it was discussing, that I couldn't not include this on my list. It was definitely one of my favourites, and the most surprising of the year as well, I think. I didn't expect to like a book that had kind of horror at the centre of it, and dark, nasty, evil stuff at the centre of it, but the writing and the way the story was told was just so evocative and beautiful, so I highly recommend this book as well. The other book that was again so close to becoming a finalist for SBFBO for me was this one, Moon Deeds by Palmer Pickering, book number 1 in this series. I loved this. I would say it's kind of borderline between young adult and new adult. It's definitely focused on younger characters who are sort of in their teens, but I think it's a wonderful series starter, and I'm really interested to see where the story is going to go. It's a very easy read, it is quick to get through, and it follows two twins who have a kind of power about them, but they're not quite sure how to access it or what it really means. They have to flee Earth and go up to the moon in order to escape an invading force of aliens who are kind of taking over, and they are trying to form a new life up on the moon, but already there is a kind of corruption there, and they are trying to stay hidden but also trying to build a new life and trying to find out about their ancestry. There's a lot going on. I've done a full review. I really enjoyed this as well, and highly recommend you check out pretty much everything on this list, to be honest, but definitely this one and Serafina. I think they're both really great. Now on to my top 2 books of the year, both of which were so brilliant, like so brilliant. I loved them, and they're going to be some of my favourite books ever for a long time, I think. The first one I want to talk about is this one by TJ Klune. It is book number 1 in the Tales of Verenia, and it's The Lightningstruck Heart. Now, if you do pick this one up, I would highly recommend getting the audiobook of this, because it is so good. The voice acting is incredible, really well done. The narrator does such a superb job that I couldn't put it down. As soon as I started listening, me and Steve listened to it together, and we just both loved this. It is an LGBT heavy series. This is the first one, and it's fantasy, but every single character is LGBT in some form or another. It's so positive, it's funny, it's witty, it's adventurous, it's so crazy how good this book is. I can't even tell you guys. I loved it. The characterization is so funny. The wit and the humour and the adventure is beautifully done. The author just knows what they're doing when it comes to writing characters who are real. They feel so real, so genuine, but also so horny and lusty, and it's definitely not a series that I would recommend to younger readers. It definitely has a lot of sex, a lot of thinking about sex, a lot of just adventure. It's steamy, it's LGBT, it's so good, and I don't know why more people haven't read this, because honestly it's so wonderful, and I'm going to be recommending it to everyone. I've already made like 3 of my friends read it, and they all absolutely loved it and went straight on to the next book in the series. I love it. This is definitely one that I think you guys should go and try the Audible sample. you know, where you can play the sample on Audible. I would recommend going and listening to the sample, and if you like the sample, you're gonna love the book, because the sample's great, but the book itself is so good. I gave this 5 stars, no question about it. It was one of the best experiences I've had reading an audiobook, but with that being said, do not listen to it in a place where you're kind of going to get in trouble for laughing out loud, because I didn't want to listen to this at work. A, it's very steamy. B, it's definitely got some hilarious moments that will laugh out loud. So you don't want to be listening to it somewhere that's not going to be okay, like your workplace. But if you can listen to it whilst you're traveling somewhere, or when you're on the train, something like that, where it's not really an issue, definitely do. Oh my gosh, it was great. And I'm still listening to the rest in this series. I'm on the 2nd book at the moment, loving it. I think the whole series is going to be great, and I really recommend this to you guys. And of course, my number 1 book, which is basically on par with the one I just showed you, The Lightningstruck Heart, but it's probably no surprise to any of you, The Sword of Kaigan by M.L. Wang. This book was the one I chose as my finalist for SBFBO, and it is also my favourite book of the whole year. It really was exceptionally good. The writing in this, it's epic fantasy, but it's the kind I love, where there's new twists, great characterization, emotional moments. This is a standalone, but it's set in the Theonite world, and I want to read all the other Theonite books now because I love this one so much. And I'm really excited for you guys to be reading it. I know a lot of you, since I did my review, have commented and said you've read it and you loved it. I'm so glad to hear that, because I think this is one of the best books in epic fantasy right now. I highly recommend this. I don't really want to tell you guys all of it again, because I've already talked about it in lots of videos, but it's excellent. I gave it 5 stars. I highly recommend it, and you guys should read it if you haven't already. Those were my top 10 books of 2019, or that I read in 2019. I'd love to hear in the comments what your top book of 2019 was, and also, because I really didn't read that much traditional publishing in 2019, please let me know if there are any 2019 releases that I should have read that I didn't get round to. I'd love to have your thoughts on that as well. So thank you all so much for watching, and I'll see you very soon in another video. Bye guys!
Thank you for watching my video today. Go pick up a book, then come back and chat with me again.